19th of July, Rabbi Moore, Parsha Hashavua, Matos.
Judy's still learning with Sarah, just to let you know.
Okay, thank you for letting me know.
I hear them through the walls here.
Good sound, huh?
Yep, excellent.
Shalom Aleichem, Rabbi Amori. How are you?
Baruch Hashem, how are you?
Baruch Hashem.
Only be for Simchas.
Amen. I went to 2 Levayas yesterday.
I too. Wow.
In the morning, I had one for a friend of my wife and I, a woman, a very elderly woman. And then in the evening, I was in Bnei Brak for the funeral of Rabbi Levine from Telz, Chicago. And Bnei Brak was unbelievably hot. We got there at like 10 o'clock, and it was like midday.
My wife always describes the heat in Bnei Brak as follows. You know, when sometimes you're traveling on a bus, especially an intercity bus, and you get off the bus, you get this woof of hot air from the back of the bus. Right? Yeah, now in Bnei Brak, it doesn't go away.
That's a very good description.
Okay, let's go. Okay.
According to my footnote, my pointer, we're in the middle of the Rashi.
Yeah, well, we continued yesterday because we did over the phone.
Oh, right. I wasn't here yesterday. That's right. So forget about my marker.
And we got up to...
Yeah, I still have that too. We got up to Dalit, I think.
Yes. Okay. So Pasuk Gimel, just to give you a quick background, Pasuk Gimel told us that the man makes a vow, he mustn't profane it. It means he cannot, the vow cannot be annulled.
Yeah, okay.
Under normal circumstances. He can go to a chacham, and the chacham can be matir the neder, which means he can dissolve the neder to say it was never existent in the first place. And that's because the person who made the neder did not have full realization of the circumstances that were existent at the time. And had he been fully aware of all the circumstances at the time, he would not have made the neder. So Kilo, the Chacham tells him that the neder was made under false pretenses. Well, not quite false pretenses, but it means under
False assumptions.
False assumption. And Mele, if the person had known what the real situation was, he would never have made the neder in the first place. Okay, that's how a Chacham is matir neder. Now, here we're going to see by a lady, woman, sometimes her neder can be annulled even if she is not regretting having made the neder at all. The husband, and we're going to see initially the father, and also the husband have a power to nullify the neder, even if it's against the will of the woman. Okay, let's see Pasuk Dalet. Lou.
Okay. V'isha ki sidor neder lashem v'asra isa b'veis aviha bin ureha. And a woman, if she shall vow a vow to Hashem, and she will prohibit.
In this context, or she makes a prohibition of she forbids herself with a prohibition, okay? Beveis aviha binureha.
In her youth.
Right, in the house, literally means in the house of her father in her youth. Okay?
In her youth.
Rashi's going to explain something, a couple of points over here.
Oh, Rashi's going to comment on in her youth. Okay,
That is right.
Aviha, in her father's house. Rishus Aviha, under her father's authority.
Right. Meaning,
But-
the base of Vio doesn't mean that she's physically in her living in her father's house. The base of Vio means she's under her father's jurisdiction. Okay,
And
and that
so,
that is
so even if she's not in his house.
right.
So what does it mean under his jurisdiction? That's not really defining anything.
Well, we're going to see the next part thing is binureha, in her youth.
So is that an and or it's an or?
No, and that's a definition. This is a definition of what is, when is she bevesavia, under the jurisdiction and control of her father, that when is she benureha, she's in her youth. Now,
Velo kitana, but not a minor. Velo bogeris, nor one who is mature.
right,
She haktana ein nidra neder. That a minor, her vow is not a vow.
right. I mean, she doesn't really have full understanding of what she's saying. Mela, when she says, I'm forbidding myself with something, or this object is forbidden to me, and she would say it in the prescribed language. Nevertheless, it's still not considered a neder because she's too young to realize what she's saying. Now,
So-
in this actually, in Rashi, and that is Rashi's going to go on to explain.
So in context, when it says a katana, it means a girl who is less than 12, correct?
No, the katana is less than 12, correct, yes. Now, Rashi's going to actually qualify this in a minute and say sometimes a girl under the age of 12 is, yes, considered, her vows are considered valid. If she has shown that she's of intelligence to know that she knows what she's talking about, and she's serious about what she said, that this should be a vow, then from the age of 11, i.e. a year before she has reached the age of binureha in her, how do you call it? Youth. Is that the right word? Binureha means, in other words, by a girl, a woman, there are basically three physical stages. There's a stage of katana where she has shown no signs yet of puberty. There's ureha when she has shown the initial signs of puberty. And then when she's a bogeres, when she's fully mature. Okay?
So you're
those
talking
are
about,
the three stages.
you switched from intellect to puberty. What are you talking about here?
Okay, so I'm saying Ureha is when she's in the stage of puberty, meaning she has the initial signs of puberty, which are two pubic hairs. And then for 6 months on average, she's during that stage. And after she's gone through 6 months, then she's considered to have been fully physically mature, that she is now a fully mature woman physically. And similarly, I was going to see it's going to have an effect on her as far as Nedarim are concerned, that she no longer has a din of a Nara, she has a din of a Bogeres, and therefore she's on her own as far as her vows are concerned. Her father cannot annul her vows anymore. It's only during the period of Binureha, when she is in the stage of puberty, 6 months of puberty, is the father able to annul her vows. And this is what Rashi is pointing out, is that before she's a Nara, if she's an average girl, right, of average intelligence, then before this she's a Nara, any vow that she makes is not considered a vow at all. She's too young, she doesn't know what she's talking about. Once she reaches the age of 12, which is the stage of puberty, then her vows are considered valid, meaning she knows what she's talking about, but the father has an opportunity to nullify those vows if he doesn't want them to stand. But that's only during the period of 6 months between the age of 12 and 12 and a half. So the initial stage of puberty is on average, and this is what we assume, is from the age of 12, that she's already considered an nara. For 6 months, between the age of 12 and 12 and a half, she's considered a nara, she's been ureha, and during that time, her, as far as she is concerned, her level of maturity is concerned, she's considered her vows are vows, but during that time, her father can nullify her vows. Once she's reached the age of 12 and a half, then she's on her own, meaning her father can't nullify her vows anymore, and therefore any vow that she makes, she's considered like a man. Her vows are valid unless she goes to a chacham, and the chacham says, well, I see that you made the vow under a misnomer to think that it was under these such and such circumstances. And if you had realized you wouldn't have made the vow, then the chacham can dissolve the vow. Okay?
All right, so Binureha in her youth, we read that already. Shehaktana, we read that already. Vehabogeres Eina Birishuso Shel Aviha. And as for one who is older than 12 and a half,
right?
She is not under the authority of her father. Lehafer nidareha, for him to nullify her vows. He cannot nullify her vows when she's older than 12 and a half.
Right.
The Ezo he katana. And who is the one that is a katana? Amru Rabusenu, our rabbis have said, Bas Achas Esrei Shana V'yom Echad. She is 11 years old and 1 day.
You have to continue. If she is 11 years old and 1 day, then her vows are investigated.
Im Yada, if she is aware, the shame me need nadra, for whose sake she is vowing, ule shame me hikdisha, and for whose sake she is consecrating.
Right, means something, making something hektish, right?
Right.
Then
Disha hektish nidra neder. Then in that case, her vow is a vow. In other words, it is binding.
Right.
Shetem.
No, Mr. What? Bas shtemesre shana v'yom echad.
Shana b'yom echad. If she's 12 years old and 1 day, Eina tzaricha libadek. It is not necessary to examine.
Right. She doesn't need to be investigated if she knows what she's talking about, because we can assume she already knows she's of even somebody, a girl of average intelligence. Once she reaches the age of 12, she's already of the level of intelligence to know what she's talking about as far as Nedarim are concerned, and therefore she's already considered, her neder is considered a valid neder. But during those, at least during the first 6 months, her father, even if she's unmarried, her father can nullify her neder. Okay, that's what we're going to see in the next psukim.
Now, Rabbi, earlier in this conversation, you mentioned puberty.
Yes.
I don't see anything in Rashi about puberty. He just seems to be talking about age.
Oh, so now Rashi did not mention, Rashi did mention 11 years old and 12 years old, but the Gemara says actually that these are assumptions, meaning what makes her Nara is that she has Simone Narus, means she has signs of being a I don't know how you call her Nara. She's not
Mature.
a child, she's not a minor, and she's not fully mature. She's at a middle stage. I don't know how exactly you would translate it. Let me see how I translated it. Just 1 second. Second. So, youth, I said it, in her youth. Okay, she's a young girl, and she's in her youth. Okay, but youth means, in this particular point, means between the age of 12 and 12 and a half. But Lamaisa, Chazal say 12 and 12 and a half is not the actual definition of what Nurel. Nurel means that she has signs of puberty. Then she's already considered a Nara. When she is 12 years old, we assume she already has these signs of puberty. Okay?
So what is it that we're examining when it says her vows are examined?
We're examining her intelligence, right? We're not examining her physical state, because we're saying that she's basically, when she's 11 years old, I'll put it in different terms. Maybe I'll explain it better. The idea, there's 2 points over here. The idea is she knows what she's talking about. A girl who knows what she's talking about and is intelligent enough to say that she's making a vow, and she realizes fully that she's making a vow. Okay, that's a level of intelligence that is not be'etzem dependent on her physical state. And that's what Rashi points out, that when she's 11 years old, even though physically she's had absolutely no change whatsoever between the time when she was 10 years old and 11 years old, nevertheless, as far as Nedorim are concerned, since her intelligence may be of the level that she understands what she's talking about, then if she does know what she's talking about and she makes a neder, then her neder is considered a neder. Okay? And her husband, even though it says binureha, while she's a young woman, right? Her husband can, her father can nullify her vows. This also applies that if she be 11 years old and she's clearly intelligent enough to know what she's talking about, her father will be able to nullify her vows.
Even when she's 11.
Sorry?
Even when she's 11.
When she's 11. The point is that when that's what Rashi's pointing out, when she says binureha, that even though she's intelligent, and we assume she's intelligent, because once she's already reached the age of being a nara, which is an assumption of being 12 years old, once she's reached that time, we assume she's intelligent enough to know what she's talking about, and therefore her neder is valid. But nevertheless, her father can nullify her neder. So Rashi's pointing out that this power of being nullifying her neder is only mentioned with regard to her being 12 years old, is because only when she's 12 years old do we assume that she knows what she's talking about. But it could apply as well that if we know a girl is of higher intelligence and even when she's 11 years old, she knows what she's talking about, then that halacha applies to her too. Meaning, an 11-year-old girl who makes a neder and she knows what she's talking about, and her neder is a valid neder, the father will be able to nullify her vows. She's only 11 years old. And the Torah says, Binu Reho, when she's a Nara. So Rashi saying, no, that doesn't mean. Binu Reho means only up to Binu Reho, but not older than that. But younger than that, that too.
So in that case, she would be in that state for a year and a half.
Correct.
But no matter how precocious she is, she never will qualify into that state before 11.
Yeah, that's the assumption. Yeah, that's what it seems out from the Gemara.
And no matter how immature she is, she will always become a bogeris at 12 and a half, and her vows are valid.
So, by the way, that doesn't mean necessarily if she's known to be immature and of below average intelligence, and she is well understood that she doesn't know what she's talking about. So even if she's a Nara, we don't say her vow is a vow. It's just the assumption on an average girl, when she's reached the age of 12 years old, it can be assumed she knows what she's talking about, and we don't even have to investigate to try and see, well, is she of enough intelligence or not? We can assume she's of average intelligence, and therefore she knows what she's talking about. But if we know that she's below intelligence, so even if she's 12 years old, but she doesn't know what she's talking about, then her neder is not a neder. Okay?
So we have a difference here between boys and girls.
Yeah.
In that for girls, we identify this intermediate stage of intellectual maturity that nominally it lasts for a half of a year, in which case she has the special status and special laws. But for a boy, we don't identify anything like that. We just say from one day before 13, he's a katana, and one day after, he's a whatever.
Right, he's a model, and he's fully himself. Right, because this whole concept of somebody who's in other words, that a boy should be under somebody else's jurisdiction to be in control of him doesn't exist. It only applies to a woman. A girl,
He's a katana, he's a katan.
right? Now, cotton, the chat is because he's below intelligence. I mean, in fact, the Gemara says a similar thing. A boy of 12 years old, even though he's not bar mitzvah, but we also say nedarov nivdokim, that we also check out, investigate his nedarim, and if he's an intelligent boy, right, and we already assume that at the age of 12, he understands what he's saying, then his nedarim are valid, even though he's not considered mature yet, fully mature yet, till he's the age of 13. But as far as his nedarim are concerned, already from the age of 12, his nedarim are valid. The only thing is, the difference between a boy and a girl is, besides the age of why a boy is 13, a girl is 12, but besides that, this concept of a boy being under somebody else's jurisdiction, that his father, let's say, can cancel his vow, can nullify his vow, that doesn't exist.
So in other words, if he's 12 years old and he makes a vow and we determine that he's not intellectually mature enough, then we just say your vow is canceled, but it's not the father that does it, it's the Beis Din.
Sorry?
It's the Beis Din that makes that determination, not the father.
Yeah, and also it doesn't need a cancellation of the vow. The vow never existed in the first place because he didn't know what he's talking about.
Is there a practical difference between a canceled vow and a nullified vow?
Yes, I mean, let's say we have a boy who's of average intelligence, and he makes a vow, and we say he doesn't really know what he's talking about, so then he doesn't need any form of hatorah. It doesn't even fall of nullification or dissolving his vow. His vow never existed in the first place. Whereas if we're talking about a boy who did know what he's talking about, so his vow was valid, and now he has to go to a chacham and to say, well, did you fully realize the circumstances in which you made your vow? Right? If you would have realized to say that you're not going to eat any ice cream, and your favorite uncle came from had already come from America, and he was going to bring you your favorite Ben and Jerry's ice cream, would you have made your vow not to eat ice cream? She says, oh no, I wouldn't have done that. So then, just like an adult is of that situation, so the child from his an intelligent child over the age of 12 would also be like that. So in other words, at the end of the day, could be there's very little difference. But the point is, an average intelligence boy of 12, his vow is nothing. An intelligent boy, a super intelligent boy of the age of 12, his vows are binding. They are reconsidered vows, but he would have to go through the process, just like an adult would have to go through the process of dissolving his vows if there was made under unknown circumstances or whatever, depending on what the situation is. Okay?
So the boy who is 12 and a quarter vows, I'm not going to eat ice cream. And then his uncle shows up and his father says, why aren't you eating ice cream? And he says, I made a vow.
The father can't cancel it. The father has absolutely nothing. He's not a mandoma.
But the father can say, you're not mature enough to have made that vow.
So the question is, who is the one to determine whether he's mature enough or not? I don't know if the father's really the one to determine that. Maybe it's based on the ones who needs to determine that, not the father.
So the father would then have to take the boy to Beis Din, and they would
Right.
examine him, and they would make the determination, and they would either say, the vow stands, you cannot eat the ice cream, or they would say, the vow never existed, go ahead and eat the ice cream.
Right.
For a girl, same age, 12 and a quarter, made the
Then
same vow.
That's a possibility in saying, she says, and she's really serious about it. I don't want to eat ice cream. I'm really serious about it. And the father says, you did such a stupid thing like making the vow not to eat ice cream. I'm not having that. I'm canceling your vow. He can do that.
Even though she, okay, even
Because
though.
I really want to keep the vow, and I did it with sound body and mind, and I really did it with full intelligence and full consciousness. You couldn't care less. The father says, I don't want it, I'm canceling it. He has that power.
Okay. I got
Okay.
Now I have a philosophical question for you.
Okay.
Why? Why is there this difference between boys and girls?
Because to a certain extent, the girl is under her father's jurisdiction, father's control, whereas a boy is not. In what way? We find similarly that a father can marry off his daughter when she's a nara. He can say, even against her will, technically, and say to the father comes along to face Yankala. He thinks Yankala is a nice, fine person to be a husband for his daughter. And he says to, I want you to, I'm very happy if you would marry my daughter. And the Yankala says, fine. And he gives the father money. And he says, here, Mr. Father, I'm giving you money, and hare bitzcha mekudeshes li. Your daughter is going to become mekudesh to me. She is mekudesh. She's now married to this man, whether she likes it or not.
Now, this is only if she is between 12 and 12 and a half, correct?
If she's over the age of 12 and a half, the father can't do that anymore.
And even if she is under 12 and a half, when she turns 12 and a half, she can nullify the marriage, correct?
No. Even if she's less than 12, the father can also marry her off.
And when she gets to be 12 and a half, she doesn't have the option to say, I don't want it.
No. If the father does it, there's another different thing, that if the father, there is no father, and the mother or the brother marry her off, which midrabanan they can do, then she has a chance when she reaches the age of 12 to reconsider, and she says, no, I don't want it, which is called miyud. But if the father does the marriage, right, then she's married. Nothing what to talk about.
I see. Okay, very interesting. Now, the jurisdiction fact that you just mentioned, that only has to do with age. It has nothing to do with intelligence, correct?
Correct. It has to do with, I mean, as again, when I say age, is because that's the average age as far as puberty. But Etzem, it's really dependent on puberty. But Chazal or Kovea, since we're not going to go check physically where every girl is, what stage she's at, so Chazal fixed that age of 12, she's already reached the first stage of puberty, unless known otherwise. If in the age of 12, she becomes a nara, till the age of 12 and a half. 12 and a half, she becomes a begeres.
So if she's 11 and a day, and she is very mature physically, so that she has the signs, and the father wants to marry her off, can he do it?
So we say, okay, that's the thing. Can we assume that her signs, let's say she has signs of full maturity, and she's only 11 years old, right? Is that considered enough that she's considered a begeres already? L'chora not, because we assume that her signs of full maturity may not necessarily be permanent. Okay, that goes into this a little bit complicated situation, but that's why
The question is not, is she a begeres? The question is she a nara for the purpose of the law about the father marrying her off?
It makes no difference. When she's 11 years old, the father can marry off as well. When she's 5 or 6 years old, she can also.
So what was it you were saying about
I'm saying that the father's jurisdiction over his daughter is up to and including the age of 12 and a half. Till 12 and a half, the father has jurisdiction over his daughter. Now, what is different about between 12 and 12 and a half, when she's considered narrow, is that technically you have a dual situation. The father can marry off, and she herself can marry herself off. If she accepts kedushin from a man, she can also become, because she's 12 years old. She's reached the level of maturity that she's considered an adult. But she's not reached full level that she's alone, right? That she's on a independent. Between the age of 12 and 12 and a half, she's on enough, shall we say, on the level that she can accept kedushin for herself, and the father can also accept kedushin. When she's a ketana, meaning she's less than the age of 12, only her father can accept kedushin, but she cannot accept kedushin. Between 12 and 12 and a half, both she herself and her father can accept kedushin for her. Once she's reached the age of 12 and a half, only she can accept kedushin. Her father is no longer able to accept kedushin. So like
all of these rules that you just explained have nothing to do with signs of maturity.
Yes, they do. But I've mentioned it because we assume that age of 12, she's already reached the first level of physical maturity. And when she reaches the age of 12 and a half, we assume she's reached already the second stage of maturity, physical maturity. But for practical purposes, we only go with the actual ages, and not with the actual proving that she has the physical signs of maturity.
But even if we could prove it, it wouldn't make any difference.
Maybe, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. It depends what the situation is.
Uh-huh.
But that's something that we follow, for practical purposes, we follow age, even though age is taken as an average of that physical change.
So a boy is under the jurisdiction of his father until he turns 13.
Right.
A girl is under the jurisdiction of her father until she turns 12 and a half.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate your help taking the time. I've never understood this. I still don't understand it, but I've got a little bit more of the facts under my belt, I guess.
Okay. Okay. We'll adjourn here and Bez Hashem continue tomorrow.
Have a good day.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Alton, be well.
Okay.
I hope I didn't bore you, Mayor.
No, not at all. It's actually a very complicated situation. You don't
Yeah, it
realize
really is.
So,
Okay.
okay.
Take care.